Imagine you're handed a blueprint for a society where women are just significantly outperforming men in the classroom.
Right.
Like they're staying in school longer and the equality metrics are basically sitting at the top of the global charts. You'd expect the society to be, an absolute economic
Well,
powerhouse, right?
absolutely. I mean, human capital is off the charts in that scenario.
Exactly. But what if the data tells a completely different, almost totally contradictory story?
Yeah, a story where the economic output just doesn't match the input at all.
Right. So, welcome to today's deep dive. Our specific mission today is to really unpack this massive longitudinal comparative research report. It's looking at the Pacific Island nation of Samoa and comparing it against, well, basically the entire global human development data set.
And we're talking about a massive time frame here, right?
Yeah, exactly. From 1990 all the way to 2023. And our goal is to uncover what researchers are calling the gender paradox hiding in Samoa's development data.
It's such a fascinating term, the gender paradox.
It really is. We want to figure out what this means for policymakers and honestly for you listening right now. Because you might actually be watching these exact same dynamics unfold in your own industry or your own community.
Oh, you definitely are. These structural bottlenecks happen everywhere.
So true. To do this, we're looking at a stack of sources covering 5 massive United Nations indices. We've got the Human Development Index, the Gender Development Index, the Gender Inequality Index, the Inequality Adjusted HDI, and the Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI, plus this really granular, multidimensional poverty analysis.
It is a lot of data.
It's a mountain of data. So, okay, let's unpack this. We're going to take you from the bustling classrooms of a Pacific island all the way to the boardrooms where the global economy is actually measured. And to help me make sense of all these numbers, I've got our resident expert here.
Thanks for having me. And, I always like to say that data isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right, it's never just numbers.
No, it's a story. It's a story about human potential. And the story we're looking at today has a twist that, honestly, almost no one sees coming.
I certainly didn't. But before we dive into the paradox itself, I feel like we really need to understand the tools used to measure it. Like, we can't fix the machine if we don't know what the dials on the dashboard actually mean.
Exactly. You have to know the methodology.
Right. And for the longest time, measuring a country's success with just gross domestic product or GDP, it was, well, it's like measuring a person's overall health solely by looking at their bank account.
That is a perfect analogy. Yeah.
It tells you their financial velocity, sure, but nothing about their actual quality of life. So can you walk us through the UN's 5-dimensional dashboard? Like, what is the baseline here?
Yeah, so the UN realized GDP was way too blunt. So they created the HDI, the Human Development Index. This is your baseline. It aggregates 3 fundamental things: health, education, and income.
Okay, so health, education, income. Keep it simple.
Right. Health is measured by life expectancy at birth. Education looks at expected years of schooling for kids entering the system, plus the actual mean years of schooling adults have achieved. And then income is gross national income, or GNI per capita.
And that gives you a score, right?
Exactly, a score between 0 and 1. The closer to 1, the better. But like you said, that's just the baseline. It's an average. And averages can hide a lot of sins.
Yeah, if 10 billionaires live in a tiny town, the average income looks great, but everyone else might be broke.
Precisely. Which is why we need the second dial, the GDI, or Gender Development Index. This literally just takes that HDI score and calculates it separately for women and for men, and then gives you the ratio.
So it measures parity.
Yes. A GDI of exactly 1 means absolute perfect gender parity in those basic achievements.
Okay, makes sense. What's the third one? The GII.
The Gender Inequality Index. Now, I love the distinction here. If GDI measures the balance, GI measures the loss.
The loss, like a penalty.
It's exactly like a penalty. It measures the loss in potential human development because a society is actively placing barriers in front of one gender. It looks at maternal mortality, political empowerment like seats in parliament, and labor force participation.
Wow, so it actually docks points if you're holding people back.
It does. And then the fourth metric goes even broader, the IHDI, the Inequality Adjusted HDI. This takes the baseline HDI and mathematically discounts it based on how unequal the distribution of health, education, and income is across the whole society, regardless of gender.
So if a country is hoarding all its wealth at the top, their score just plummets.
Exactly. It's a reality check on class-based inequality. And finally, we have the PHDI, the Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI.
The environmental reality check.
Yeah. It basically asks, hey, at what cost to the Earth did you build your wealth? It adjusts the score downward based on a nation's carbon emissions and material footprint.
What's fascinating here is that these indices seem like they're almost designed to fight with each other.
Oh, they absolutely are. That tension is intentional. A country could look like a complete utopia on the baseline HDI because they have immense industrial wealth. But then you apply the PHDI, the planetary pressure one, and their score just totally collapses because they're, emitting catastrophic levels of carbon.
It forces you to decide what kind of progress is actually sustainable.
Right. And this friction is exactly what we're going to use to dissect Samoa's trajectory.
I love that. And for you listening, I really want you to think about how your own workplace or even your own life is measured. Do the key performance indicators, like the metrics your boss tracks, do they capture the whole picture? Or just the easiest things to count, like hours logged at a desk?
That's a great point. The gap between what's easy to measure and what actually matters is where things fall apart.
Exactly. So now that we know how we're measuring, let's look at the global playing field before we zoom in on our specific case study of Samoa. Set the global context for us from 1990 to 2023.
Okay, so if you look at the overarching story of the global HDI from 1990 to about 2019, it's just this relentless, steady march upward. In 1990, the global average was 0.608.
Okay.
And over the next 30 years, despite wars, financial crashes, whatever, it just kept ticking up. By 2019, it hit roughly 0.745. Hundreds of millions of people globally getting better health care, more school, higher incomes.
It sounds incredibly reassuring.
It was. But then we hit 2020. The global health crisis triggered a shock so profound it literally reversed 3 decades of momentum. We call it the global development regression point.
Right, because for the first time ever, the global HDI actually dropped.
Yeah, in 2020 and 2021, it fell back down to 0.742. Life expectancy plummeted, schools closed, supply chain cheesed up. It was a severe systemic trauma.
But it bounced back eventually, right?
It did. By 2022 and 2023, there was a sharp rebound. The 2023 global HDI reached 0.756, which actually surpassed the pre-crisis peak. The world basically absorbed the punch and kept moving.
Okay, so that's the global tide. Now let's look at the island's climb. Bring in Samoa's numbers for that same period.
Right. So in absolute numbers, Samoa's story actually looks pretty positive at first glance. Back in 1995, their HDI was 0.655. By 2023, it had grown to 0.708.
So they improved. They expanded life expectancy, got more schooling, made more money.
They did. But here's the catch. In 1995, that score of 0.655 earned Samoa the 75th spot globally.
Okay, 75th is solid, upper half of the world.
Right. But by 2023, their improved score of 0.708, that dropped them to 128th out of 203 nations.
Wait, hold on. So they got better, their absolute score went up, but their rank completely plummeted.
Exactly.
That is wild. It's like, okay, it's like training all year to run a 6-minute mile. You finally do it, you break your personal record, you're thrilled, but then you show up at the race and find out literally everyone else is now running a 5-minute mile. You improve, but you're still losing.
That is exactly what happened. It's the ruthless acceleration of global development competition. Standing still, or even moving forward at just a moderate pace, effectively means you are falling behind. Massive regions of the world, like Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe, just hyper-industrialized during those 30 years.
And an island nation like Samoa just didn't have the economic horsepower to keep up with that level of hyper-industrialization.
Right, so their rank collapsed into the 120s.
Okay, so if Samoa is falling behind in the overall global rankings, we have to figure out where the specific failure is, like which pillar is dragging them down.
And this is where we have to look at education.
Yes, because here's where it gets really interesting. The data on education in Samoa presents just an absolute shock. Walk us through the expected years of schooling.
Okay, prepare yourself. In the 2023 data set, the structural system anticipates that a female child entering school in Samoa will receive 12.988 years of formal education. Let's just call it 13 years.
13 years for women.
Yeah.
Okay, and the men?
For a male child entering that exact same system, the expectation drops to 11.931 years.
Wow, that's a full year
A
less.
full year. Samoan women have entirely surpassed men in educational access.
That completely upends our usual assumptions, right? Because we're so used to looking at developing economies and seeing infrastructure heavily skewed toward male achievement.
Exactly. Usually women are marginalized into domestic roles early on. But here, they've engineered this cultural environment that actively keeps young women progressing through secondary and into tertiary school at higher rates than men.
And how does that 13 years compare to the rest of the world?
It's incredible. The global average for female expected years of schooling, and that includes ultra-wealthy Western nations, is 13.086.
So Samoa is virtually neck and neck with the global female average. That is an education miracle for a developing island nation.
It really is. And you can see it vividly reflected in their Gender Development Index, the GDI. Because the women are outperforming the men so much in the classroom, Samoa's GDI is pushed up to 0.955.
Which places them in a highly equitable tier globally, right?
Yes, it equals the global average. Now, their rank on this fluctuates wildly because it's a ratio and it leans so heavily toward female advantage. In 2017, they actually peaked at 55th in the world for gender development. By 2023, it settled back down to 118th. But the foundational reality is the same. Highly equitable educational capacity, effectively operating with a female surplus.
Okay, so this brings up the core mystery. We have a massive surplus of female education, and in a modern economy, education is human capital, right? You acquire specialized skills.
Right, absolutely.
So pure logic dictates that if women are getting significantly more education, they should be dominating the economy. They should command higher salaries, drive the nation's income up, and boost that overall HDI rank. Why is their HDI rank still stuck at 128th?
Because building human capital is only the first half of the equation. We've seen the massive input, the education. Now we have to look at the output, the economic return. And this is where the paradox violently reveals itself.
Okay, let's look at the output. I've got the 2023 gross national income per capita data right here.
Read it out.
Okay, GNI per capita. For females in Samoa, it is $3,724. For males, it is $8,149.
It's a staggering chasm.
Wait. I have to push back on this. Women have almost a full extra year of expected schooling. They are the more educated demographic by definition, yet men are making more than double their income.
More than double, yeah.
How is that mathematically possible in a modern economy? Are women just being paid half the salary for the exact same jobs?
Well, the wage gap is an issue globally, but it doesn't solve this specific math problem. To solve it, we have to bring in the labor force participation rate, the LFPR.
Okay, what does that show?
It shows that only 31.4% of Samoan women are actually in the labor force, compared to 56.6% of men.
Oh, wow. So nearly 70% of the working-age female population is just absent from the formal economy.
Completely economically inactive in the formal sector. And to contextualize that, globally, female participation is about 48.47%. Samoa is drastically lagging behind the global average.
Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains everything. The education dividend is just entirely failing to convert into economic outcome.
Yes, we call it structural inactivity or talent drain. The society is paying heavily to educate these women, building this incredible human capital. But when it's time to deploy it, the pipelines vanish.
So they are structurally blocked, but by what? Culture? Lack of jobs?
Both. First, there's immense cultural expectation for women to manage unpaid domestic care, regardless of their degrees. And there isn't enough structural support like subsidized childcare to let them work.
And the jobs themselves?
That's the second barrier. Island economies often skew heavily toward physical agriculture, commercial fisheries, manual trade sectors, culturally coded as male. If a woman gets an advanced technical degree, but the local economy hasn't generated a modern digital or administrative sector, she literally has nowhere to apply her skills.
She is highly educated for an economy that simply hasn't been built yet. You know, for everyone listening, think about this for a second. Have you ever seen a brilliant colleague sidelined because the structure of the workplace just didn't support them? Maybe they needed flexible hours for parenting, or their specific expertise wasn't valued by rigid management. You see this talent drain on an individual level all the time, but this data shows that exact phenomenon happening on a microeconomic nationwide scale.
It's a massive invisible anchor dragging down the entire country. You cannot compete globally with half your most educated citizens on the sidelines.
So true. Okay, so if highly educated women aren't in the general workforce, we have to ask, are they, at least in leadership, are they making the rules? Let's look at the Gender Inequality Index, the GII, for the answers here.
And the GII illuminates the glass ceiling perfectly. Samoa's GII value is 0.416, which ranks 110th. But the aggregate score isn't the story. It's the specific metrics inside it.
Right, and the most glaring red flag in this entire report is their political representation. According to the data, women hold only 12.96% of parliamentary seats.
which means over 87% of the lawmakers are men.
It's an incredible juxtaposition. The group with more education holds less than 13% of the seats where the laws are written.
This really gets to the core difference between capacity and agency.
Oh, break that down for us. Capacity versus agency.
So capacity is your potential. Education gives you capacity. Samoa has been amazing at distributing capacity to women, but agency is the actual tangible power to execute that potential. It's holding a political seat, being a corporate executive, making binding structural decisions.
And the data shows they fiercely restrict that agency.
Exactly. And when you lack political representation, it directly maintains the economic barriers we just talked about.
Because if the parliament is 87% male, the policies shaping the labor market are inherently going to favor traditional male labor structures.
Precisely. They aren't going to prioritize state-supported maternity leave or incubating female-dominated modern industries because those aren't their lived experiences.
So it's a trap. The educated female workforce is trapped. They can't get into the formal workforce because the policies don't support them. And they can't change the policies because they lack the economic power and visibility to win political seats.
It's a deeply entrenched, self-sustaining feedback loop of exclusion.
Man, it just sounds like a really grim picture of inequality. But as we know with these massive data sets, there's always a twist. And the data holds a really surprising one when we look at health and the overall internal structure of the country.
Yeah, the health dividends are actually a massive bright spot.
Right, let's look at the life expectancy. Since 1990, Samoa has seen a huge health boom. Female life expectancy is now 73.66 years, and male is 69.86 years.
Right, compared to 71 and 65 back in 1990.
That's a serious medical dividend. It shows that the baseline survival, maternal care, clinics, they are succeeding.
They really are. But the true reveal comes when we bring the IHDI back into the conversation. The inequality-adjusted HDI.
Okay, let's do the math on this. Samoa's base HDI is 0.708. But when you adjust it for internal inequality, how unequally those resources are hoarded by the rich, it drops to 0.609.
Right. That's a 13.98% loss due to internal inequality.
Which sounds bad. A 14% loss sounds terrible.
It does, until you look at the rest of the world.
Exactly. The global average loss to inequality is a massive 21.958%.
Right.
It's like looking at two pizzas. The global pizza is undeniably bigger, there's way more wealth, but it is sliced terribly. A few people get half the pizza, and billions are fighting over the crust. That's the 22% global loss.
Yeah.
But Samoa's pizza, even though it's a bit smaller overall, they slice it much, much more fairly among their own people.
It's a brilliant analogy. Compared to the rest of the world, Samoa is actually highly egalitarian in how it distributes its general resources. Health and basic education aren't just hoarded by a few elites in the capital.
But wait, doesn't that make the gender gap even crazier? If they are so good at sharing resources fairly across social classes, why is the gender economic gap so huge?
That's the exact insight we need to take away here. The overarching fairness of the society highlights the acute, specific unfairness of the gender dynamics. It proves that the economic exclusion of women isn't just a byproduct of general corruption or class warfare. It is a highly specific, structural, gender-based barrier.
Wow. Okay, so we've looked at the averages, and we've adjusted the averages. But averages always hide the extremes. To really understand the foundation of Samoa's economy, we have to look at the very bottom poverty and the very boundaries of the environment.
Let's start with the iceberg beneath the surface, multidimensional poverty, or the MPI.
Right, because MPI doesn't just ask if you live on less than $2 a day. It looks at overlapping deprivations, health, electricity, sanitation all at once.
Exactly. And Samoa's MPI value is incredibly low at just 0.025. Their actual poverty headcount is only 6.3%.
So only about 6% of the population is in acute multidimensional poverty. That's a huge win for a developing nation.
It is. But as analysts, we always zero in on the causes of that 6.3%. What is keeping those specific people trapped?
And the data breaks that down.
It does. It shows that nutrition contributes 29.3% to that poverty. And school attendance contributes 30.9%.
Hold on, wait a second. We literally just spent the first 20 minutes celebrating their education miracle and their 13 years of expected schooling. How can school attendance be the leading cause of poverty?
I know, it sounds totally contradictory. But this is the difference between expected years of schooling and actual attendance at the margins.
Ah, okay, explain that.
Expected schooling is the systemic average. It means the capacity exists. But attendance is what's happening on the ground. For the poorest 6%, missing school is the precise trap keeping them poor. These are likely kids in highly remote villages or families so economically fragile that they need the kids' labor immediately just to survive.
So this system works great for the average person, but at the extreme margins, it's failing to pull the most vulnerable out of poverty.
Exactly. A glowing national average can still leave a vulnerable minority completely stranded.
Right. Okay, let's shift from the bottom of the society to the external boundaries, the planetary pressures, the PHDI.
This is such a critical metric for island nations.
So Samoa's HDI is 0.708. When you adjust for planetary pressures, carbon emissions, it only drops to 0.68. The drop is minimal.
Minimal, which is unheard of for industrialized nations. Their scores usually plummet because their wealth is subsidized by destroying the environment.
And Samoa's drop is minimal because they produce a minuscule 1.13 tons of CO2 per capita. Compare that to Western nations emitting 10 or 15 tons per person. Samoa is barely a blip.
Right, and this raises an important question. How do we, as a global community, reward low-carbon development?
Currently, we don't. We reward massive GDP output regardless of the ecological cost.
Exactly. Samoa's absorbing the existential climate consequences, rising seas, dying fisheries, driven by industrialized nations thousands of miles away. Yet they maintain this highly sustainable footprint. It's a massive ecological advantage that the traditional HDI scoreboard doesn't adequately reward.
It really makes you question the rules of the game if winning means destroying the stadium you're playing in.
That's the philosophical critique right there.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground here. So what does this all mean? The researchers use this radar chart concept to synthesize all of this.
I love the radar chart visualization.
If you picture it, Samoa's shape is wild. They are outperforming the world in education length and gender equity in school. They are vastly outperforming the world in sustainability. They match the world in health and internal equity.
But then the chart violently collapses inward when you look at translating that female education into economic income and political power.
It's a textbook case of an education surplus, but an economic conversion deficit.
Beautifully put.
So how do we fix it? What are the policy prescriptions laid out in the sources?
The researchers were very targeted. 3 main takeaways. Number 1, break the glass ceiling.
Mandate it, right.
Yes. Organic change is too slow. They recommend mandating or heavily incentivizing higher female representation in parliament, getting it way above that 12.96%, and in corporate management, you have to put the people with the capacity into positions of agency.
To make them the lawmakers. Got
Right.
it. Number 2.
Number 2 is industry transformation. You have to create modern, formal employment sectors that can actually absorb these highly educated women. Digital services, modern healthcare admin, that's the only way to close that massive G&I gap.
You have to build the jobs they're educated for. And the third,
Precision poverty alleviation. Don't use scattershot welfare. Target the exact bottlenecks of nutrition and school attendance for that bottom 6.3%.
those are incredibly clear directives. And for you listening, I want to remind you that this paradox isn't isolated. Look around your own society or company. Are you investing heavily in human capital, only to put up structural roadblocks when it's time to actually use that talent? Because if you are, you don't just have a fairness problem, you have a massive economic inefficiency.
And, I want to leave everyone with one final provocative thought to really mull over.
Let's hear it.
If an island nation can achieve near-perfect educational equity, if they can live sustainably without destroying the climate and distribute their wealth more fairly than the global average, yet they are still ranked 128th by our global economic standards.
Yeah.
Perhaps the flaw isn't in Samoa's development. Perhaps the flaw is in what the rest of the world has decided development actually means.
That is exactly why we do the deep dive. We have to look past the top-line numbers and question the scoreboards themselves. Thank you so much for joining us and letting us guide you through this incredible data. Keep questioning the metrics around you, and we will see you next time.